One time back in the day, I matched with this girl on Tinder. I don't really remember how long of a conversation that we had on there. We probably talked for 2 or 3 days. Eventually, we decided to meet in person, and we decided to go to a local bar in town. It was a place that I had been to once or twice before, but not in a long time, and it wasn't that far from my place. The bar was in town and fairly popular. I didn't know much about the girl that I was meeting other than her name was Amy. We were meeting at like 9 p.m. for drinks, and I arrived right on time. I walked inside, and the bar was fairly busy. It was a pretty large place, and I was not that familiar with it despite having been there before, because like I said, it had been a long time. I looked around the bar for Amy, but did not immediately find her. There were a lot of people there though, so I decided to text her. She responded quickly, saying that she was at the patio, which was out the back door behind the bar. I figured there was more space there, and it was a nice night, so I walked to the back of the bar. I opened up the door to the back and then walked outside. However, when I got there, I was very confused. There was no patio in sight. I was in what appeared to be an alleyway of some sort. There was another building and a very small parking lot and then some dumpsters and stuff. I looked around, but there was no patio area. I wondered if somehow I was at the wrong bar. I went to go back inside of the bar, but the door was locked. So I was in this alleyway, and I realized that I would have to go back around the bar. And as I was looking around, I noticed there was this one car that was parked in the alley, and its lights were on. It was a black SUV, and the lights were so bright that they were nearly blinding me when I looked in the direction. When I took a few steps into the alley to go back around the bar, the SUV door started to open up. Someone got out, and I soon saw that it was a man, but I didn't get a good look at him. He started to walk towards me, and I had a really bad feeling about it, so I turned around and started to walk the other way. When I did, I heard the man's voice yell at me to stop. I did not stop though. This made me go faster, and I started running away. When I began to run, the crazy thing is that I heard the man who yelled at me start to run after me. I did not look back. Instead, I just sprinted faster. I got to the side of the bar and then went around it and then back to the front. I didn't stop and went all the way out to my car, quickly unlocked it, went inside, and then locked the door. That's when I finally looked around, but I didn't see the guy chasing after me. He must have stopped. I drove home and just wanted to get away from there. When I was back, I went on my phone and looked to see my messages with Amy and see what happened. I wanted to make sure that I had the correct bar and stuff. However, when I looked, Amy had blocked me. That's when I started to suspect her being involved in whatever happened. I mean, she definitely told me to meet at that bar. I looked up other bars if they had a similar name, and there was no other bar that sounded similar at all, so I know I was at the right place. And there was no patio in the back at all. She had told me to go out into the alley where that guy chased after me. I think it was some kind of a setup, and I'm really glad that I got away. For some context, I'm a female, and this story took place last year. So I met a guy on Hinge, and we started talking a little bit. Based on his profile, he was a good-looking man, and when we talked, he seemed funny and caring. But that was just my first impressions of him from talking for a day or two. I remember he asked me to come over, and I thought that was probably not a great idea for a first time of hanging out. I suggested instead that we could meet at some place and get to know each other a little bit. He agreed and said that he understood. The guy then suggested a park that was pretty local. I live in a city, so most places are fairly busy when I go there, and we were meeting at 6 p.m. when I figured it would still be a little light out. So I even looked up the park online, and it seemed fairly busy most of the time, like a good public place. So I agreed, and the date was set. I was a little bit nervous for some reason, but when the time came, I went to the park. I drove there because it was a little bit too far to walk. After parking on the side of the street, I walked along the sidewalk and arrived at the park. I was a little bit early, and I texted the guy that I was there. The park was very large, and there were a few walking paths and large areas of open grass. There were also many trees and some areas that were decently wooded. After walking inside a little bit, there was one area that looked like a good spot to stop and wait. Sort of off the path near some trees there were a couple of benches, so I sat down on one of them to wait. I looked on my phone but hadn't got a response yet, So I just sat there and looked around. There was nobody else really in that area. Not long after, though, a man came down the path, but it was not the man that I was waiting for. He also was not really looking at me, and I thought that he was just going to walk right by. However, the guy sort of went off the path a good distance away from me and just kind of started standing around. I actually wondered for a moment if that was the guy that I was waiting for, but I quickly dismissed it. This guy looked nothing like the man who I had matched with. This guy in the park had sort of long blonde hair, glasses, and was pretty skinny. None of the features that the man I matched with had. I continued to sit there and wait. Soon the time of our meeting came and went. After 10 minutes of waiting, I still hadn't heard anything from the guy. The man that was sort of standing around was also still standing there. The guy who was standing around never really looked at me though. I texted my date asking where he was, and I continued to wait. However, he still did not reply to me. After waiting for a while longer, I got frustrated and decided to leave. I got up from the bench and went back on the path and walked through the park. After I left that particular area, I happened to notice that the guy who had been standing around left a short time after me. I got suspicious when I saw that, because this guy had been standing around not really looking at me or anyone for almost the entire time that I was there. Then, as soon as I leave, he does too? It was just too weird. So I walked quickly and was headed back for my car where I parked on the side of the street. I walked down the path a little ways with the man a good distance behind me, probably over 100 feet back. So when I made it around the bend to the street that my car was on, I felt better. I just wanted to get out of there at that point. I got closer and closer to my car, but suddenly I heard something behind me. I looked back and realized that the man was running at full speed in my direction. It was the craziest sight. I quickly hurried up and ran to my car and was thankfully able to get inside. I drove away just moments before the man reached me. When I got back, I still had no response from the man that I had matched with, so I blocked him. I figured that was the guy who chased me and he had catfished me using someone else's pictures. A couple of years ago, I met this girl on a dating app. Her name was Alyssa, and we talked for a while on the dating app before getting each other's phone numbers. Then we started texting, and texted back and forth for several days. Eventually, we decided to go on a date with each other. The plan was to go to a restaurant nearby that was fairly popular. So I remember that I went there and I met with Alyssa at the restaurant at night. We got a table and then started talking with each other. She seemed really nice and a lot like she had seemed through our texts. I was hoping that she would like me as well. Overall, things were going good, and we were having a nice conversation just getting to know each other. About 30 minutes or so into the date, and I remember that I got a text message. I felt my phone get a notification, and I could tell that it was from a text. I didn't look right away and ignored it, but just moments later I got another one, and it made me curious. When I did, I looked and saw that it was from a number that I didn't know. I found this odd. Alyssa saw me looking at the texts, and she asked what it was. I told her that a random number was texting me. The text that I had received each called me by my name and told me to come outside by my car. I was very confused and told Alyssa how I had no idea who was texting me that. She seemed to find it interesting and said that I should go and see who it was. I remember that I told her no, I would just ignore it, but Alyssa said that she would wait there for me and I should go see. Just then, I got another text. It was from the same number, and the person texting me said, "Come outside now," in all caps. I was pretty curious about it, so I decided to go and see who was there. I was really not sure at all of who it could be. So I got up from the table and I walked to the front of the restaurant and then outside. When I got into the parking lot, it was dark out, and there were still many other cars in the lot. I had parked sort of in the back of the lot and at the end in front of a bunch of trees. That was because those spaces were some of the only ones not taken when I got there. So I walked through a couple of rows of cars until I got to where mine was. Just as I was starting to approach near where my vehicle was, I started beginning to look around. I didn't see anyone at first, but then I saw 3 men come out from behind a couple of trees that were a ways in front of my car. They were nearly impossible to see at first, but they quickly came into sight. I didn't get a good look at any of the men. They all came literally running towards me. I just remember that the men were wearing sweatshirts and sweatpants and also wearing winter hats. As soon as they approached me, I turned and immediately ran away. I had a very fast reaction, and I'm also a pretty quick guy. I ran back through the rows of cars and sprinted for the restaurant again. Thankfully, I was able to make it to the doors and get back inside. I suddenly felt a rush of relief. The men did not come inside. However, they could still go back out and hide by my car. I went to go find Alyssa and tell her about what happened, but when I got back to the table, she was gone. I was confused, but figured that maybe she went to the restroom or something. I sat back down at our table and waited. I looked around and didn't see the men or Alyssa. After 10 minutes of sitting there and waiting, I knew something was up. I went to text Alyssa and it didn't go through, indicating that she may have blocked me. I went to the dating app where we had matched and she was not there anymore. I was very confused, so I sat there at the table unsure of what to do for several minutes. There was still no sign of Alyssa, so at that point I decided to leave. And by the way, Alyssa didn't even pay her half of the bill or anything. So before leaving, I asked our waiter about Alyssa, and he actually told me that he saw her get up and leave. That made me angry, and I decided to leave after that. I was nervous to walk back to my car though. This time, when I made it to the road that my car was in, I looked around very carefully. I had an idea, and I hit the panic alarm on my car, which started to go off. I don't really know if anybody else was in the parking lot, but that brought attention to my vehicle in case anyone was, and there were significantly less cars there now. I didn't see the guys, so I ran to my vehicle and got inside and then quickly drove away. I'm not sure if those men were still in the woods or not, but if they were, they didn't try to get me again. I ended up reporting Alyssa and the men to the local police the next day, as well as to the dating app. I'm not really sure if anything was ever done, and I'm also not sure if Alyssa was even her real name. I tried looking her up on Facebook and Instagram or Google, but I never got her last name, so I couldn't find her. After that, I stopped using dating apps. I'm really glad that I came out of that situation unharmed. My name is Abby, and several years ago, I matched with this guy on a dating app. I had been on a few dates with guys from apps here and there. Some were alright and some were not, but nothing really crazy had ever happened. So I matched with this one guy whose name was Sebastian. In his pictures, he appeared tall, had dark hair, and after matching, he reached out to me. We started talking, and within a few days, he suggested that we go on a date. I was feeling good about things, so I agreed. However, I did not feel like I really knew Sebastian that well at all yet, but I figured that it would be a good chance to get to know him a lot better. Sebastian suggested a pretty fancy restaurant, and I was somewhat surprised. I didn't know if he was really rich or trying to impress me or something. I remember mentioning how the place was really fancy, and he said that was good. Before the date, he offered to pick me up, and I said no thanks. I figured he was just trying to be nice. So I drove to the restaurant and met him there. We sat down in the very nice restaurant and started talking. Sebastian overall seemed nice for the most part. However, some things just seemed a little bit strange about him. He looked just like his pictures, so he was no catfish, but it was more of his personality that for some reason seemed a little off. I didn't know exactly what it was at first. I remember though a couple of times he asked me where I lived. The first time I told him in the city, and then I asked him where he lived, and that was just normal conversation. He asked me where in that city, and I told him a little more specific area, but still pretty basic. And then he asked me what street I lived on, which I found kind of odd, and I'm not sure why, but I told him. I lived in an apartment building at the time, so that wasn't giving away exactly where I lived. The conversation changed after that when we talked about different stuff. A while later though, he asked me if I lived in an apartment. I don't remember how exactly the conversation shifted to that. I said yes, and told him the name of the complex that I lived in. However, he then asked me what my apartment number was. By now, I found this very odd. I asked him why he wanted to know that, and I jokingly asked him if he was going to send me flowers or try to break into my place. He laughed about it, and then I kind of changed the subject without giving up my room number. There were a few other things he said in conversation that were a little odd, and I can't remember specifics now, but I just remember that the longer we talked, the more I had a strange feeling about him. I tried to look past it though and just enjoy the date at the nice restaurant. We were there for well over an hour. When we were finally going to leave, Sebastian offered to give me a ride home. I told him that I drove there myself, so I didn't need one. He said that he would walk me out to my car instead. I said that was okay, so we walked out to the parking lot, hugged, and then went our separate ways. I got into my car and drove back home to my apartment. After getting back, I didn't really know what to make of Sebastian, but overall, I did not want to go on another date with him. I went to bed that night only to wake up a short time later to the sound of somebody knocking on my apartment door. I didn't know who it could be. The knocking was sort of constant, but not that loud. I got up and walked out of my bedroom and over to the front door. The knocking had sort of stopped by then. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing. Whoever it was appeared to have left. I almost opened the door and looked in the hallway, but decided not to. So I started to walk back to my bedroom to go back to sleep, as I was not even 100% awake yet. But on my way back to my bedroom, I heard another knock. This was very strange, and I walked back over to the door and looked through the peephole again, only to see nobody there once more. I was really confused at this point and didn't know what to make of this. So I just kept looking through the peephole. I'm not sure why, but I kept looking for like over a minute straight. Then, as I was still looking, I saw a man suddenly come into view, and surprisingly, it appeared to be Sebastian. He quickly knocked on my door again, and then even faster went to the side of the door going out of my sight. I was extremely creeped out by him now. I wasn't sure what to do, but I certainly was not answering the door. Somehow, Sebastian knew where I lived. I stood there by my door for a minute or so. I just wanted him to go away. Then he knocked again. That's when I figured I should do something. I yelled loudly, "I called the police, Sebastian." Not long after this, I thought I heard footsteps walking away. I didn't hear any more knocking for at least 5 minutes, and at that point I decided to look in the hallway. I very carefully opened my door just a crack. The hallway appeared empty. I looked around and he was nowhere in sight. It seemed as though I finally got him to leave. Then I reported Sebastian to the dating app and then blocked him everywhere. And since then, I have not seen or heard from him. I don't live in that apartment anymore either. I still don't know exactly how he knew which apartment was mine. Obviously, I had told him where I lived as far as the apartment building, but I never gave him my room number. I also didn't notice being followed home by him or anything. The only thing I can think of is maybe somehow he did follow me home, but he must have been very sneaky. Or else he got to my apartment and asked somebody if they knew where I lived maybe. Either way, that was by far my craziest experience with a dating app. This happened back when I was in college. I would go on Tinder and some other dating apps sometimes. I had a few dates over the years. At one point, I matched with this girl on Tinder. I remember her name was Sarah something. So after matching with Sarah, I just said hi to her. I wasn't some guy that had clever pickup lines or anything. I would just say hi when I matched with women, and if they wanted to talk to me, they could say hi back. Most of the time, though, I would never hear back from them. This time, though, this Sarah girl responded and said, "Hey, what's up?" We started a conversation and talked for a little bit, just basic stuff of getting to know each other. She went to a different college than me, but it was one that was very close to the college that I went to. They were probably like 10 minutes apart. So we talked for a couple of days, but the conversation kind of died out. She didn't really seem that interested anymore, and then after I said something during the basic conversation, she did not reply to me. I had seen this happen before, and I didn't think much of it. However, about a week later, she did respond. Then she was super nice all of a sudden. We started talking again, and she suggested that we should hang out sometime. I figured why not, and we ended up getting ice cream together a few days later. We met up at a place between our two colleges. Pretty much, we just walked around and talked for a while, and it went pretty good. She seemed nice and stuff. We then went our separate ways again. Overall, I thought she was cool, and I probably would have gone on another date with her. We talked a little over the next couple of days, but then she randomly stopped responding to me again. Once more, it's something that I had seen before, so I wasn't too surprised or anything. However, a few days later on the weekend, she randomly texted me. It was pretty late at night, and she asked me if I could give her a ride. Now, I don't know why, but I said yes. I should have ignored her text, but I didn't. I asked her where she was, and she said that she was at a friend's house and had been drinking, and the friend that she got a ride with left without her. Maybe it was because I didn't want any kind of a drunk driving situation, but I agreed. I really wish I had just ignored her though. So she sent me her location, and I couldn't really decipher where it was exactly. After going onto a map, it seemed to be an apartment building or something. I placed a pin right where her location was, and then drove there. It took a little while to get there, and when I did, I was very confused. I was driving on these narrow streets for a while, which were near residential neighborhoods but also close to the local downtown. Then it took me to this really dark and narrow alleyway, and about halfway down it was her location. I stopped right where it was and I texted her that I was there. The buildings on both sides of me were fairly tall and did appear to be apartments, but I was at like the back side of them and it didn't seem like a normal place where people would come in and out of them. So I just sat there and waited. She texted me back and told me that she would be down in just a minute. I continued to wait. About 5 minutes went by and I was getting impatient. She sent me another text telling me to keep waiting and she would be right there, so I continued to wait. About 5 minutes or so went by and I was getting frustrated. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard a door opening nearby. This door in the alley opened and I saw these two guys come running out towards my car. They were both holding what appeared to be hammers in their hands. The guys went straight for my vehicle. My instincts kicked in and I quickly put my car into drive and hit the gas. Right as I did, they reached me. One of the guys grabbed at my door handle, which was locked, and the other swung the hammer at my car. I heard a loud noise, and then the guys got a few more hits in on my vehicle. However, I was able to get away from them. I drove all the way back without stopping. When I made it back to my place, I looked on my phone and Sarah had blocked me. I then called the police and reported the incident. After it happened, I was really angry for a while. I didn't go on Tinder or anything after that. Looking back at it now, I'm just grateful that I got out of there. My car had some dents in it, but most importantly, I was uninjured. I really don't know why Sarah set me up for that.